There was once a woman. Now, this woman had been sick for a very long time. She'd been sick for 12 long years. At first, she'd gone to lots of doctors and she'd paid them money and asked them for help. But one by one, the doctors said, "There's nothing we can do for you. We're really sorry." The woman had neighbours and friends. They had started by visiting her, but now no one came. Some of them said in whispers to each other, "Perhaps the woman has done something really wrong that God is punishing her for." Others said, "We might catch it too." And some said, "It's a bit boring, really. She never gets better. And they have their own lives to lead." So they stopped visiting her. So now the woman was sick and lonely, and she had no money. She heard about a man called Jesus, and she thought to herself, "Perhaps if I could only see him. I hear that he makes sick people better. Perhaps he could make me better." But then she thought, but perhaps he too would think I was a bad person. Perhaps he'd think God is punishing me for something I've done because I've been sick for so long. And the woman began to lose hope. Now Jesus had a cloak. He would most often wear his cloak over his shoulder. Just like that, as he was walking about. He always had his cloak with him. Most people had cloaks. All of his disciples, his friends, had one. And to be honest, they all looked kind of similar to you and to me. But Jesus knew his cloak. It was familiar to him. He knew how it felt. He knew how it smelt. He knew how it looked. And more often than not, as I say, it was on his shoulder. Sometimes during the day, when it was very hot, just after lunch, he and his disciples would sit at the side of the road and they'd stretch their cloaks over their heads to form a little tent to keep the sun off them. Then, in the tent, they'd rest a while and chat to each other and keep a little cool in the heat of the day. But at night time, Jesus would wrap his cloak round him tight as they sat around the fire. Oh, it was nice to be warm and snug in your cloak. All of his friends would sit round the fire with their cloaks round them, talking and sharing stories. But to be honest, most of them best of all liked to listen to Jesus' story. He told stories that were amazing, that were life-changing. Then, one by one, they'd get sleepy and it would go quiet as they settled down to sleep round the fire. But today, Jesus had his cloak over his shoulder, as usual. They were all hurrying along because something had happened. A man had come to Jesus, an important man, and said to Jesus, "My little girl is sick. And you, Jesus, are the only one who can help me. Please, please, can you help? Can you come? I'm sure that if you prayed for her, she'd get better." So Jesus has said, "Yes, of course I'll come." And he was hurrying along the road with his disciples, kind of pushing through the crowd a bit as everybody crowded in around them. Right at the edge of the crowd, in the shadows of the doorways, was the woman. She didn't want anybody to notice her, so she kept way back. But there she was, in the doorways, in the shadows, watching Jesus and keeping pace with him at the back of the crowd. She thought to herself, if I could just touch his cloak, I'd be healed. And that's all I need to do. He doesn't need to know me or talk to me. I know that I can be healed if I could just touch his cloak. So she kept pace at the back of the crowd. And then she saw her opportunity. So she reached her hand through the crowd and grabbed the very back of Jesus' coat, which tugged and slipped through her fingers. Immediately there was a change. Immediately she felt well again. She felt full of life. Her cheeks went pink. Oh, all the pain went. Oh, she felt young again. Wow. Jesus stopped. He looked round and said, which one of you touched me? His friends said, don't be silly, Jesus. Everyone's touching us. They're all crowding in and pushing and shoving. No, said Jesus. Somebody meant to touch me. I felt like power go out of me. Who was it? And the woman came forward and she knelt down in front of Jesus and bowed her head. And she said to him, Lord, it was me. I've been sick for 12 years. And I thought, if I could only touch your cloak, I believed you'd heal me. And look at me, Jesus, look at me. I'm healed. I'm better. Jesus looked at the woman and he said to her, daughter. He didn't call her daughter because she was his daughter. She was probably a lot older than him. Jesus said to her, daughter. He said to her daughter because he wanted everybody to hear that he considered her to be part of God's family. He wasn't condemning her. He wasn't saying she'd done something bad. He was telling everybody and her that God loved her. He'd never called anybody daughter before. I don't think he did it again either. He said, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. And she did. The lady went away, healed and in peace. Wow. She couldn't wait to invite her neighbours and friends round to her house. And when they came, she told them her story. She told them how Jesus was now her friend and that God loved her and that Jesus had healed her and, so much more. But because this woman had been through what this woman had been through, I believe that every time she told her story, she'd notice everybody in the room. And she'd notice the women who felt unnoticed. And she'd make a special point of telling them how Jesus could heal their hearts and change their lives too. That Jesus wanted to be their friend and that God loved them and counted them as part of his family.